Welcome to 21st Sports. Football is back, and so are we here at 21st Sports, talking football, talking the season opener for 2016, the Super Bowl 50 rematch between the Carolina Panthers and the Denver Broncos, played September 8th, 2016, up there in Denver, a Mile High. And the thing is, so about this rematch, is Peyton Manning would not be there. As I'm sure you're all aware, he has retired. So that was the difference between this game and Super Bowl 50. But it sure was exciting regardless, as Trevor Siemien made his debut under center for the Broncos. And would he be able to do enough to get this team to victory against Superman, Cam Newton, and the Panthers? And both of these teams have very stout, tough, and rough defenses that are tough to score against. And it was a tight game for sure. They came all the way down to the wire. And both defenses were on display, playing spectacularly on both sides of the ball. Of course, the Panthers, they're without Josh Norman, as he's now with the Redskins. So on both teams, you had some big names going on to other avenues, whether it be retirement or another team. And actually on the same side, in terms of Peyton being on offense and Norman on defense, and those two matching up against each other on the field. But it was a tight game, back and forth, came all the way down to the end. And in the final moments there, Cam Newton came up clutch, not super clutch, because he didn't get him in the end zone, but he got him into field goal range. But of course, Graham Gano, if you didn't see it, spoiler alert, at the very end there, he ended up missing the field goal wide left. Of course, this was after he had just made the field goal, but Denver had called a timeout just before they snapped the ball, and so they had to re-kick it. And that first kick, if it had counted, the Panthers would have walked away winners. They would have won by 2 instead of losing by 1, 21-20. But that first kick, it bounced off the right upright, and it went in. And, of course, Gano, you got to wonder, did he make the adjustment, as Collingsworth actually wondered aloud on air there on Thursday Night Football, if he maybe made that adjustment because it bounced off the right upright, and then he went a little bit too far to the left. Of course, up there in Denver, although the ball does sail, sometimes it can be tough to get it through the uprights accurately, as we saw there. But don't put too much blame on Graham Gano, because if it wasn't for Graham Gano, it wouldn't even have been a one-point game. He'd already made 2 field goals earlier in the evening, and even he had made a field goal not that long prior to that, missed one, where that put them within 1. So if it wasn't for Gano, they would have needed a touchdown just to tie it if he hadn't kicked those earlier field goals before missing the game winner after he had just made it. That's the thing too that's tough, is making that second kick in Denver. Gotta give it to the coaches, very smart, a good play there to call a timeout right then. There's the argument, is that a good time to call a timeout? Because sometimes calling a timeout right there, maybe they miss it and you give them a second chance and they make it, but in this instance they made it, and then the timeout forcing them to kick again ended up in a miss and a victory for Denver as they pulled this one out. Like I said, both teams played really well on defense, as both teams were forcing some turnovers. Trevor Siemien, in his rookie debut officially in an NFL regular season game, I thought he looked pretty good despite the 2 interceptions. Of course, I wouldn't really put that all on him, as he was hit when Ben Wickery intercepted him, so that one really wasn't on him. He had, got hit pretty hard there by the defense as he was throwing the ball. That threw it off target. It ended up being a little underthrown. So he actually seemed like most of his stuff, he was putting pretty good gas on it, and he was actually, for the most part, most of his throws seemed to be more, where only the receiver could get it. Even if the receiver didn't catch it, usually the receiver, would be getting his hands on it, or, was out of the reach of the defender, other than when he was under pressure there. And of course, when you get hit, it's almost impossible to throw on target. And that is a tough Carolina Panthers defense. regardless, even without Norman. They're one of the top defenses in the league. So I thought Siemien, although not big numbers, he only threw for 178 yards, and he did have those 2 interceptions. He did have the touchdown, and he didn't make too many mistakes. He played good enough for that defense to carry him, and of course also an excellent output by C.J. Anderson, just shy of 100 yards with 92 yards on the ground off of 20 carries and a touchdown. And of course, Andy Joanovich, the other rookie there on offense from the Big Ten, from Nebraska, coming up with a touchdown on his very first carry of his NFL career, a 28-yard touchdown run for Joanovich. So it was another bright spot for the Broncos, as they had some pretty decent performances from their rookies from the Big Ten, as of course Siemien is from Northwestern. Cam Newton over on the other side there with the Panthers, he had 1 touchdown on the ground and 1 through the air, which he actually passed Steve Young for the most games with a touchdown on the ground and through the air for a quarterback, the most games doing that with 32, where Young had done it in 31 games. Of course, it took Young 90 more games to accomplish that feat. So Cam Newton definitely making records, as he's got a storied career that it continues this way. He'll be enshrined in Canton eventually down the road. Of course, that's quite a ways off, but despite even that, record-setting performance there, and also, I believe he set a record too for the most touchdowns on the ground also as well, but not really getting the job done, of course, against this Denver defense. They're stingy, and it's tough to come away with a victory in Denver. It's tough to put up numbers in Denver, although its numbers were decent, not, really big numbers, just 194 yards through the air. But against that Denver defense, that's still, not bad. And he did have 54 yards on the ground, as I said, 1 touchdown throwing, 1 touchdown rushing. But it just wasn't enough, just 1 point shy there. Even though he made that nice throw to Calvin Benjamin to set up that field goal attempt that would end up going wide left there in the final seconds of the game. But Calvin Benjamin having a pretty good game, though, with 6 catches for 91 yards and a touchdown earlier in the game. And Greg Olsen, of course, 7 catches for 73 yards, as he is Cam Newton's favorite target, and he is Mr. Reliable. Of course, that's the thing, Cam, he always comes up big in those clutch moments, but just wasn't able to get him into the end zone there in the fourth quarter, although he did put them in a position to win. But, of course, if they got in the end zone, then there would have been no ifs, ands, or buts about it, and it wouldn't have mattered if they would have made the kick or not. Like I said, if it hadn't been for those couple of kicks earlier, they wouldn't have actually been in the position to win with another kick, which did not go in. Which usually Graham Gano, he's one of the most solid kickers in the league. But that's just the way the cookie crumbles up there in Denver. As both teams played good enough to win the game, but it just ended up going the way of the Broncos. So it was quite the season opener. Very exciting all the way down to the finish. Had us all glued to our seats. Let me know what you think about this game, what you thought about Trevor Siemien's debut. What do you think about Cam? What do you think about both defenses? And what do you think about things moving forward for both of these teams? We saw stars coming up big on the Denver defense with Von Miller coming away with a sack. Also, DeMarcus Ware with 1.5 sacks. And Harris with that interception of Cam. And on the other side, Tom Davis with the interception. And, of course, Ben Wickery, as I mentioned earlier, with the interception of Siemien. So we had some pretty good play on both sides. The Panthers were actually a little bit more efficient on third down than the Broncos. The Broncos, that fourth down conversion came up big for them. And total net yards were pretty close, with 333 for Carolina, 307 for Denver. And on the ground, the Panthers netted 157 and the Broncos netted 148, although the Broncos averaged 5.1 yards per rushing play versus 4.9 for Carolina. Got to wonder if these teams had just kept it on the ground a little bit more, although they did both rushed for quite a few plays, as 32 rushing plays for the Panthers and 29 for the Broncos. And through the air, Cam ended up netting 176 yards, although he did end up with 194 yards passing. The Broncos netted 159 yards through the air. They also look at the penalties that hurt the Panthers in this game, as they were penalized for 4 times as many penalty yards, although just twice as many penalties, with 8 penalties for 85 penalty yards, and just 4 penalties against the Broncos for only 22 penalty yards. So that definitely was a factor, as well as the red zone efficiency. Actually, the Panthers were a little bit more efficient than the Broncos in the red zone, 2 for 3, 66%. And then the Denver was just 1 for 2, 50%. Of course, Joanovich, that 28-yard touchdown. But the time of possession was actually in favor of Carolina, 32 minutes, 19 seconds versus 27 minutes and 41 seconds for Denver. And usually if you win that time of possession battle, things play out in your favor, and they almost did. It came very, very close to a victory for Carolina. They almost pulled one out there up in Denver, which would have been pretty big winning a game like that on the road. But it's one of the toughest things to do in football, that is win in Denver. So winning in Denver is not easy to do, as the Panthers found out last night, as I'm sure they were already well aware of. But even with the rookie quarterback, Denver coming up big, as they've got one of the best defenses to step onto a football field, as they proved last year, as that defense carried them through the season and all the way through the playoffs to the Super Bowl and to a victory. Will they be able to do that again this year? Well, they're starting off on the right note, and things really can only get better for the offense. And if the defense continues to play the way they did on Thursday night, things are looking good for Denver. And things are looking good for Carolina, although they did lose. They almost won, although almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. But still, with an effort like that, if they play like that most Sundays, although it was a Thursday, but most Sundays or even Mondays or any day where you're playing football, if you play the way the Panthers did, 9 times out of 10 you're coming away with the victory. And 9 times out of 10, Graham Gano makes that kick, so it's almost a little bit of a fluky thing there. Graham Gano doesn't miss too many. He is one of the better kickers in football. Like I said, I would not really put the blame on his shoulders. You know, you win and lose as a team. Let me know what you think in the comments section below. Thank you very much for listening. It is greatly appreciated. We'll be bringing you more videos as the season continues, so keep an eye out for those. Again, thank you very much, and I hope you're having a good day and having a great week, and have a great weekend, and enjoy all the sports.